Welcome once again to Auto Mundial, the weekly home of all the latest motoring news and reviews. This week we bring you an extra special episode featuring some of the top Le Mans inspired road cars ever produced.
We've also got the future of luxurious A-list travel.
Plus pops and bangs of a synthetic nature from a renewed sporty Abarth.
That's all coming up. First though, the news.
The data has been counted and the numbers are in, as the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders reports a disappointing month of April for the automotive industry, with new car registrations in the UK dropping by 10.4% versus the same month in 2024. In total, just over 120,000 vehicles were sold in April, bringing the 2025 total up to 700,000. The fall in registrations comes from a drop in diesel and petrol demand, but without a matching increase in uptake for lower emission vehicles like battery electrics and plug-in hybrids. In fact, while zero-emission models experienced an 8% increase in demand year on year, it doesn't offset the circa 25% decrease in pure combustion registrations. As of April this year, battery electric vehicles accounted for 20.4% of the market share, up by 4% from last year. An impressive total, but that is still a long way off the ZEV mandate's required 28% share for 2025. So, if UK consumers don't swiftly make the move to zero-emission models, manufacturers will be facing some hefty fines come January of next year.
Since the dawn of the luxury people carrier itself, has the Mercedes V-Class been the go-to in personal transportation for the rich and famous. But despite getting a touch-up last year, the popular van is getting long in the tooth. Its looks are getting a bit drab, and its rivals' cabins are starting to catch up to its Dreamliner-like comfort. And so the three-pointed star is now looking at ways of innovating the premium people carrier space, and we struggle to imagine anything more premium than this. Looking as though it has time-travelled from the 22nd century, this is the Mercedes Vision V, the newest concept from the German manufacturer looking to introduce its future designs. Gulping and squinting at the same time, the front end is far from the prettiest thing we have ever seen, and the side profile looks like it should be transporting bodies of the colder variety. Nevertheless, if you're the target clientele for this new look, it isn't the exterior that you'll be worrying about. What you really want to know is how Merc has elevated its interior space over the current V-Class. Well, if you thought the existing model resembled first class on a cross-continent flight, think of this as a private jet. Despite its length, just 2 seats feature in the rear quarters of this high-roof limousine, with the middle portion of the cabin dedicated to a blinding 65-inch cinema screen, complete with surround sound. Mood lighting capable of turning your lounge into an underwater light show, and supremely luxurious materials coat the space. If high-end upholstery and trim don't provide the wow factor you're after, perhaps a collection of wacky design pieces will, with furnishings combining soft spherical shapes and see-through elements, the whole thing culminating in these seats. We cannot decide if they look comfy or cramp-inducing. Either way, both fold all the way down into bed form, so no matter how long your journey, you should arrive at your destination refreshed. How much of this bonkers car actually makes it to production when Mercedes does eventually replace its V-Class, we're unsure, but the Vision V is certainly a fun idea that the interns on the design team must have enjoyed.
Super estates, sporty crossovers and hot hatches. Bolstered variants of everyday models typically get heart rates going just as much as high-end supercars for a fraction of the cost, and for that reason, they're fairly popular over here in the UK. Well, now with electric tech all the rage, there's a new breed of family wagons dropping dad bods for shredded six-packs. Among the most recent craze is this, the Skoda Elroq RS. In regular form, the Elroq is a perfectly pleasant, all-electric family car perfectly capable of completing the school run in comfort. But if you're in search of a few added frills, the RS model certainly has you covered thanks to a number of jazzy exterior touches. Inside suede is very much the theme of the day, with the regular car's cabin covered from head to toe in the stuff. A sportier three-spoke steering wheel, paddles for controlling regen, metallic pedal covers and fake carbon fibre trim on the door cards make up the bulk of the styling changes. The 13-inch screen, comfy centre console and child-friendly rear space all carried over from the top trim Elroqs. It isn't all about the suit though, as the RS emblem also provides the Elroq with an overhauled powertrain, with the previous range-topping 280 brake horsepower model's rear motor accompanied by a further motor on the front axle totalling 335 ponies. All-wheel drive means 0 to 60 sprint in just 5.4 seconds and a top speed of 111. Power comes from an 84 kilowatt-hour battery, providing some 340 miles of range. That all sounds very impressive, but as we said at the top, this Skoda is just the latest entrant to the new electric hot family car faction, and this is the benchmark.
What you're looking at here is the Abarth 600e. If you recognise that Italian name, it's because it used to produce bullish and burbling variants of standard Fiat 500 city cars. But now the outfit has clearly turned its hand to something of the larger variety, though one flyby and you realise the first Abarth crossover is still very much a rumbling brute. Desperately grasping to its combustion roots, the Italian car maker has fitted the 600e with speakers, with the sole aim of injecting a bit of soul into its clinical, new age creation. Where power used to come from a small turbocharged four-pot, the Abarth 600e gets a 54 kilowatt-hour battery powering a single Formula E-derived electric motor on the front axle, developing either 240 or 280 brake horsepower. It may not get the sheer power or the all-wheel drive layout of its rival, but the 600e will still hit 62 from rest in 5.8 seconds and go on to an Elroq crushing 124 miles per hour. And without a motor on the rear end, it should drive a little more like a hot hatch of old. Visually, the Abarth appears to be built with supermarket car parks on Sunday mornings in mind, with its leery decorations, sharp slits and eye-catching colours. That fierce design continues to the inside, making for a more theatrical environment than the Skoda, with its harsher buckets, contrast stitching and focused instrument cluster. But you do get a sense that tech and comfort are not quite as high on the priority list, which may dissuade you from using the Abarth as your daily driver. Then again, costing some £10,000 more than the Abarth's £37,000 starting price, you would expect the Skoda to provide a little more bang for that extra buck. Whether the Czech creation can live up to its excitable Italian rival, we'll have to wait and see when deliveries commence later this year.
After the break, as a motorsport fanatical mob descends on the French town of Le Mans, we take a look at some of our favourite road-going races of recent years.
Welcome back. Coming up, a stroll down motorsport's memory lane.
As we speak, the likes of Porsche, BMW, Ferrari, Alpine and so many more manufacturers are fighting it out in central France for top honours at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. An iconic race with over 100 years of history behind it, this is the pinnacle of long-distance endurance racing. But it isn't all about race cars at Le Mans, as many of the event's most famous victors can trace their roots back to pedestrian, road-going models that even the common Joe can enjoy. No-holds-barred iterations of several premium road-going mile munchers like the BMW M4, Porsche 911, Ford Mustang and Ferrari 296 GTB are all going hell for leather around the infamous Circuit de la Sarthe. One such car taking on its first French Enduro this year is the Aston Martin VALKYRIE, a bonkers, eye-widening creation put together by some of the brightest minds in motoring. Where the road-going hypercar gets power from an ice-cap-friendly hybrid unit, the Le Mans Racing LMH model drops its electrified power, instead choosing to let all 670 brake horsepower run free from its 6.5-litre V12. Couple that to a circa 1,030 kilogram weight, and you have yourself a rather impressive bit of kit. In fact, despite its many kicks, flicks, wings and fins producing enough downforce to stick the car to the ground at high speeds, the VALKYRIE, along with its other hypercar competitors, will reach the dizzying heights of 210 miles per hour, lap after lap after lap, for 24 hours. But that is where the VALKYRIE's racing variant falls short of its unrestricted siblings. In fact, the so-called LMH car is probably the least impressive of the three Aston Martin VALKYRIE variants. The most impressive, you ask? Without a doubt, the AMR Pro. Hold on, this looks identical to the race car, so what's so special about it? Well, where the Le Mans racer must fit the constraints of a tight and fairly lengthy rulebook, this track day special needn't concern itself with power limits, minimum weight and aerodynamic quotas, nor must it meet emissions and pedestrian safety standards like its road-going cousin. The Aston Martin VALKYRIE AMR Pro therefore sits in a unique Goldilocks zone of engineering where the stars align and nothing gets in the way of raw speed. A top speed of over 250, 62 from a standstill in 2.3 seconds, and then dropping back to rest in just 25 metres while exceeding 3.5 G. This is what you get from 1,100 brake horsepower, no more than a ton of mass to shift, and some impressively sticky tyres. And all that's available to us regular Joes to purchase. That is, if you could afford its current market value of anywhere between £3.5 and £5 million. At that price, how hard would you dare drive your Aston Martin VALKYRIE AMR Pro?
Bentley. First established in 1919, this British luxury marque's history stretches to pretty much every realm of the automotive industry. But following the great success of the Bentley boys in the 1920s, plus a brief interruption of Audi dominance in 2003, the manufacturer's long-winded story is intertwined with the 24 Hours of Le Mans. To celebrate its successes some 100 years ago, the Flying Bee is once again appearing on a Bentley blower, but this time in miniature form. You may think that you're looking at a century-old open-wheel racer built for the upper echelons of society in a pre-war era, but what in fact you're looking at here is a 2025 creation, sporting all the modern tech of your modest city runabout. Built to an 85% scale of its muse, this is the Bentley Blower Junior, and unlike the first of its name and its 130 mph 4-litre supercharged engine, this modern interpretation boasts an unassuming 20 brake horsepower from a 48-volt all-electric powertrain. As a result, it doesn't quite match its namesake's performance figures with a top speed of just 45 mph. What you get instead, though, is a brilliantly usable and yet still eye-catching ULEZ Invader. A sheep in wolf's clothing, if you will. As we've said, this new model takes the original car's design and dimensions and shrinks them by around 15%, making for a car that, while still voluminous, should just about get around town without much hassle. Made predominantly of carbon fibre with the odd aluminium touch, harking back to the blowers of old, it is said to sport agile handling despite its teensy wireframe wheels and what look to be bicycle tyres. Either way, with the wind in your hair, it's bound to be quite the experience from behind the wheel. In total, just 349 units will be made, each available with near-endless levels of customization, so you'll struggle to find two blowers alike. And the price for this vintage yet modern racer with the same power output as a shopping trolley? £100,000.
Bentley is not the only manufacturer with a rich history of sprinting down the Mulsanne Straight in the most famous 24-hour race of the year. However, pretty much every car maker has given the event a go at some point or another. But one Le Mans racing manufacturer whose Le Mans stories always spring to mind is Ford. The American marque's fierce rivalry with Ferrari throughout the 1960s is widely documented, whilst later forays into the event have proven just as fruitful. But our favourite Ford racer of them all has to be this. Taking the original 1960s car as inspiration and pushing the limits of its contemporary class, the Ford GT is surely among the most ridiculously raw race cars of recent times. But where there's a racer, there is also a road-going model upon which it's based, and in this case it's the thoughtfully named Ford GT. Much like its racing sibling, the GT first launched in 2016, just in time for its first year of racing, with production of the road car kicking off a year later. Since then, this prototype-looking beast has achieved great success around the world, both on track and in the public eye. That seemingly instant popularity is no doubt thanks to the GT's looks. Simply look at it. A sleek wedge-shaped body with highly aerodynamic elements like these flying buttresses, deep cuts and an active wing. The third iteration of the Ford GT is one of those creations that looks more like a spaceship than a car. Despite its futuristic look, several design pieces hark back to older GT visuals, from its round taillights to low roofline, and several square echoes on the front end. When blended with the likes of this so-called Heritage Edition livery, the GT appears to be a perfect combination of retro and futuristic styling, something it seems every car maker has tried to accomplish in the last few years. Inside, that medley of old-time and cutting-edge styling gets very much thrown out the window. Instead, you get a driver-oriented and focused cabin with as few distracting elements as possible. Carbon fibre, suede plastics and even thin perspex glass cover this minimalistic space for optimal weight loss. Then again, it still gets Apple CarPlay and Android Auto on this 6-inch screen. How luxurious! Where Ford GTs of old were powered by thunderous high-capacity, naturally aspirated V8s, this third generation dropped a pair of cylinders for a disappointing twin-turbocharged 3.5-litre V6, sporting the EcoBoost number plate. Yes, the same architecture as your hybrid Cougar, but producing around 650 brake horsepower, there frankly is no comparison to be made. It doesn't sound too bad either. All that means that despite not getting hybrid assistance or fancy all-wheel drive, this blue oval supercar will complete the 0 to 60 dash in just 2.9 seconds and go on to 216 miles per hour. Should you keep your foot flat, that is. Between 2017 and 2020, Ford produced 250 examples each year, totaling to 1,000 units sold. But with several limited runs like this Heritage Edition adding to the count, it's believed that around 1,300 examples left the factory doors in total. Sadly, the GT is no longer on sale, and so getting your hands on one will inevitably lead to hours of scrolling through classifieds and scoffing at inflated price tags, with the car currently trading for around £500,000.
Next time on Auto Mundial, the celebration of French sportiness continues with the 70th birthday of one of the country's favourite manufacturers.